All right, last class we left off talking about breathing. One of my classes I covered this, but I didn't get to everywhere. So, a couple different things that we're going to go on in the lungs, the division of the lung volumes and things like that. So, we're going to look at that real quick. The first measurement is your tidal volume, which is just simply the volume up here. It's normal breathing in and out. That's what we're referring to. Your residual volume, if you were to take a deep breath in, take all that air in and force all the air out, what's left over is your residual volume. Your vital capacity is everything but your residual volume. That's basically your maximum air. Therefore, your total lung capacity then would be your vital capacity plus that residual volume capacity. And we're going to measure this in class next time. And here's just a real quick description of those. You might want to kind of look at that and make sure to write that down. Specifically the amount and what these terms refer to. All right, so what determines your breathing rate? Breathing rate is going to be a product of the materials in your blood. A lot of times people think about it as the lack of oxygen in your blood that actually causes an increase in blood, but when we look at it, an increase in CO2 concentration will increase breathing rate. And so basically that's what our major measure is to cause that. Once again, there's part of our brain called the medulla oblongata that's going to be responsible, but as the CO is in our blood, what also will happen is, along with lactic acids building up due to working out, is a pH. And so what will happen is as the blood pH changes, we'll get an increase in breathing as well, caused by the CO2. Cellular respiration, we've talked a lot about this when we talked the first course. I'm not going to spend too much time about it. Just remember that we talked about aerobic and anaerobic. This does happen in stages. Those stages are characterized by enzymes. The first part of the process is glycolysis. It costs us 2 ATP. Put a minus sign. You get a net 4 ATP, net 2. Then we have the oxidation of pyruvic acid. Nothing really happens there. It just prepares to enter into the mitochondria, where the citric acid cycle occurs. And in there, that's where we're actually going to give off our CO2. And some electron carriers are produced as well, the citric acid cycle. And some NADHs are also produced. And then those products will end up leading into the electron transport chain, and that's our big payoff for the majority of our ATPs generated. Aerobic was with oxygen, and once again, the big thing that remember is how much ATP is produced in this process. It's going to generate a lot more energy for us. Anaerobic, once again, is a different route. There's no oxygen happening in this case. We're getting more alcohol fermentation in bacteria and yeast, things like that. And also we're going to get the generation of lactic acid, which can build up and cause issues. So I'm going to kind of move on to the next slide. If you need to good time to pause it if you need to look at this a little longer. Once again, all this is a review. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. What are some conditions that can happen? Well, one of the common ones is bronchitis. You've probably heard of bronchitis before and its effects. Basically, what happens is the bronchial tubes can be inlined and infected, caused by a variety of different things. The cilia themselves are not able to naturally remove those materials, and they become clogged. You cough a lot. It's a very mucousy cough initially. And then what happens after the mucus cough goes away, because of the irritation to the area, they actually hurt, so you can kind of that dry, painful cough afterwards. Asthma is an environmental, typically an acute attack caused by a bunch of different things. Different people have different sets off of this if you do have asthma. Air pollution, very common. Perfumes, paint odors, sometimes weather changes. Um, all those things can kind of create this. During the process, the bronchial tubes themselves narrow. By doing that, prevents the oxygen from entering the lungs. And once again, a lot of times it's characterized by kind of a wheezing sensation. Typically, the common solution is a inhaler of some kind that will provide a steroid, specifically the steroid albuterol. Now, this is not the steroid that's going to make you big and tough or anything like that, but what it does do is helps control the asthma attack. Emphysema, I mentioned this one in class as well. Notice the changes in the air sacs and the alveoli. More surface area, more absorption and exchange of gases. Much less than emphysema. Typically a person with this, it's a chronic condition. Smoking is a typical cause. Other pollutants can be as well. And basically a lot of times people who have this have to get on ventilator, or not ventilators, but oxygen. Lung cancer is another one. And once again, cigarette smoke is the number one cause of lung cancer. So is secondhand smoke. My uncle died, was not a smoker, but his wife was, living in the house with a smoker, not having the filter. Once again, is a major issue. Pneumonia, once again, it's caused by a bacteria or virus. A lot of times it's a major concern in hospitals for elderly people. The alveoli down here, they fill up with fluids, and by them filling up with fluids, they can't do gas exchange, and therefore causes some major issues. In elderly people, this can be life-threatening because it makes their entire circulatory system work harder because of the lack of oxygen, and that's why it is a major concern. Getting the fresh air into their lungs is an important way. So if you do go to the hospital, a lot of times they'll have the little breathing containers to make sure you're maximizing your breaths, getting some more air in the lungs, getting fresh air into there. That gets us into the circulatory system, and I'm just going to kind of introduce a couple things in here before we move on. Number one, we got this stuff after we do transport. What's going to happen is we got to combine the cells and the nutrients with oxygen. By doing this, energy is going to be released. And what we're going to specifically look at, I ran out of the room, but the transportation is actually that process of absorbing the nutrients that are found in our blood along with circulating throughout the body. And there's a couple different ways to do that. Some organisms use what we call an open system. Insects do this, and basically you can imagine where in their cavity they have their organs, and those are floating in some type of blood, or in this case a lymph fluid. A closed system, that's what you and I have. We have the organs, but all of the blood is always in something. It's in an organ, it's in a vein, or it's an artery, it's a capillary. It's not free floating. So those are basically the two ways we can have these types of systems. Absorption is what involves the passage of materials into and out of the bloodstream, where the circulation is actually distribution of that. And the transport system is also known as the circulatory system. What is the circulatory system made of? Well, you can think, obviously, you got your blood vessels, which are going to be arteries, veins, capillaries, things like that. We'll go into more detail about them next time. Then your heart, all chambers of your heart, along with the valves. And then one that's not really known too much about, or most people don't know about, I should say, is the lymphatic system, which is a filtration system for the circulatory system. As we look at it, basically blood flows in our body because we are in a closed system throughout the body, and we use it over and over again. And we basically have a couple different passageways. And you can kind of see from this diagram here the major parts. It's the heart pumping to the lungs, into the rest of the body. But at all times when the system's working properly, the blood is maintained in the circulatory system in some capacity, either in an organ or in a blood vessel of some kind. The first thing that we're going to look at is probably the most indicative of the circulatory system is the heart. There are multiple ways to have hearts. So different organisms will have different types of hearts. Humans have a 4-chamber heart. So you can see a fish heart is a 2-chambered heart. And once again, these are becoming more and more efficient. There's a 3-chamber heart, which is more common in like amphibians and reptiles. You have 2 atria, those are collection tubes, and 1 ventricle. But notice a big thing is the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood are mixed. It's like a double circulation. It's not nearly as efficient. What we have is this, which is a 4-chambered heart. And the biggest thing that you should notice, the difference between these two diagrams, is that division that we have here. So we have oxygenated blood, which is represented by red, and then blue. So if you were to actually look at a real heart and somehow see the blood in there, it would have the different colors to it. Some that is oxygenated, some that is not. Okay. There are valves in there as well that we'll learn and go through kind of in detail the different parts of the heart next time in class. So basically, when you think about this, these are the different parts. For those who take architecture, you may have heard of an atrium before. A lot of times that's the meeting place of a building. Usually has a lot of lights and windows. It's like a lobby, another way to say kind of a lobby. That's where people enter into the building, or you want them to. Same in the heart. The atrium is where we receive the blood coming back to the heart before it's sent out. Your ventricles, those are your pumping chambers. They're going to send blood out. They're obviously going to be much more muscular in that regard. Valves will control flow and most importantly prevent backflow. And then the septum is what divides the heart into the right and left. Especially important, I mean that's huge in us because we have different types of blood. We want the most efficient. We want non-oxygenated blood getting pumped to the lungs to get that oxygen, and then oxygenated blood getting pumped to the rest of the body. And here's just another diagram of all the parts. This is where we'll pick up and we'll talk about all these different parts and what we have to know. So not a bad idea if you're looking for something to study. Start looking at this, memorizing the different parts of the heart. Everything on here is something that you should be able to identify on a test. That's all I got. Remember, read the pages I told you, I think 619 to 622 in the book for class and take notes, and I'll see you Friday or Monday.